Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Pat, and today I'm going to be talking to you about educational philosophy. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction to it for you. Now this is my agenda. We're going to do a little introduction. I'll talk about my life as an educator. We'll talk about philosophy itself, kind of figure out what philosophy is. When we use that term, philosophy, what do we mean? What are we talking about exactly? Then I'll go through, for point 3 here, 5 philosophies of education that are active in the world today. And then, of course, because I have to, I will conclude. Okay? Now, let's talk about me, my favorite topic, right? I've been an educator for 27 years. I started off and I worked for 9 years in the United States as a high school teacher. I taught social studies, I taught history, I taught ESL, English as a second language, and I was a track and cross country coach. And there I am. That was my first year teaching a very long time ago. Look at all that lovely hair. And something a lot of people don't know about me is I've actually taught at Japanese high schools for a total of 5 years. I was an exchange teacher on 2 occasions. So I worked mostly in Himeji, down in Hyogo Prefecture. And then I've been working on the university level for about 13 years now, as an administrator, as a teacher in the Middle East, in Japan, in Bangladesh. Here I am now, and you can see I haven't changed at all in 27 years, have I? Well, maybe physically I have, but what you're going to find out, and I'll talk about later, is my philosophy of education has actually been very consistent. It's stayed the same for my whole career. And that is not unusual for educators. Now, when we say philosophy, what are we talking about? We need to understand that term to really be able to talk about what philosophy is and about the philosophies active in education. And there are 2 Greek words that make up the word philosophy. The Greeks love to throw words together and make new words. The first is philos, which means love. And the second one is Sophie, which means wisdom. So I think we can understand, to the Greeks, they thought philosophy was the love of wisdom. But in the common parlance, the way we use the word day to day, it usually means this. It kind of refers to your attitudes possessed by you or the group that you belong to. Okay, so the way you think the world should run, the way you think people should behave, that's all part of your philosophy. And when we talk about education philosophy specifically, it asks 6 basic questions. These are the 6 questions that every education philosophy tries to answer. What should be taught? What should be in the curriculum? What should we teach you? Who should decide what should be taught? Should it be the teacher? Should it be the students? Should it be the community? Who makes that decision? Should it be the government? You know, we have those issues in the United States. You have those issues also here in Japan and around the world. Should decisions about education be made at the community level, you know, local school boards, or should the government, the federal government or the national government, dictate what should happen in schools? Or should it come down to parents or students or just the teacher? And then why should this material be taught? Why should we teach you what we're going to teach you? What is the purpose of it? Is it to make you a good citizen? Is it to give you a job in the future, give you the skills so you can adjust to a changing world? All sorts of things. Number 4, how should this material be taught? Now, I'm sure that's something that you interact with every day that you go to class. The teacher decides how he or she is going to teach you. Is it going to be through discussion? Will it be self-exploration? Will you be lectured to? All of that. How should the material be given to you? And what should the teacher's role be? What should the teacher be doing? Should he or she be lecturing all the time, giving you wisdom, giving you information? Should they be stepping back and letting you learn, letting you explore, letting you go to the LDIC or the AAC or all these other places where we want you to be independent learners? And the 6th question, what should your role be as a student? What should the student's role be? Are you supposed to sit there quietly and passively and listen to the brilliance of your educational teachers? who will tell you information and facts, or are you supposed to go out there on your own, or maybe with a little bit of help from your teachers, and explore and discover things for yourself and teach yourself? That's the question. What should your role as a student be? So these are the basic questions, the 6 big questions that every single educational philosophy has to address. And don't think this is a new thing, talking about how to teach, what to teach, when you should be taught. This is Aristotle from 2,500 years ago, which is just a little bit before I was born. And he showed that even back then they were wrestling with the ideas of what should education be. And so he said that it's not clear. Should education be concerned more with intellectual aspects, or should it be dealing more with the moral virtue? Should we teach you facts and figures and make sure your brain works really well? Or should we also be concerned with making sure you're a good person, that you're a good citizen, that you understand right from wrong? These are issues that he dealt with 2,500 years ago, and trust me, we are wrestling with them right now. And take a look at this. Confucius, more than 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, he was talking about education. Ben Franklin, a founding father of the United States 220 years ago, also talked about education. And then, of course, our buddy Albert Einstein talked about education. I've always liked Einstein's comment here. I never teach my pupils. I only provide the conditions in which they can learn. That is part of an educational philosophy. So trust me, these issues, these questions have been dealt with for generations. And I love this little cartoon, and there's a quote here by Albert Einstein. I'm going to read it to you because I love it so much. Everybody is a genius, which means very, very intelligent. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. So obviously, in Einstein's world, he felt that everybody needs to be treated as a unique individual, that the curriculum should address the unique abilities of each student, that not everyone's the same, not everyone should be taught the same. And by the way, Einstein had a lot of trouble in school. He did not do very well. In fact, he pretty much left schooling when he was 15, regular schooling, because he just couldn't deal with it. And ironically, he was a failure at mathematics when he was in school. And we see what he did with his life after he was done with his schooling. So obviously he was good at math, but not good in the sense of what the school expected. Now, it's interesting to show you how important education is and talking about education is for the community at large. I just put in the question education quotes in Google, and I wanted to get images, and I got thousands of them. So obviously it is of importance. And I found 2 that I really liked from one of my favorite authors, American authors, Mark Twain. This is one thing Mark Twain said. Education, the path from cocky ignorance to miserable uncertainty. In other words, he felt you start off thinking you know everything, then you start to be taught and learn that, hey, you don't know as much as you thought you did. And then, I have never let my schooling interfere with my education. Evidently, he felt the 2 were separate. School is one thing, but being educated is another. And going back to our old Greeks, here's another quote by Aristotle. And Aristotle actually did have a little bit of a philosophy of education. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. So he felt, yes, we got to work with the brain, but we also have to work with the heart. We have to teach you and work with you so you know how to be a good person, how to fit in with society, how to love and be loved, I guess. And then his teacher, Plato, talked a lot about how teachers should not be harsh with children, that children need to be allowed to play, to amuse their minds. And once you identify as a teacher what really amuses the child's mind, what they're very interested in, then you can work on that. And I like his little quote here, the peculiar bent of the genius of each. In other words, just like Einstein, he felt every kid is a genius, but a genius may be in a different way. So the teacher's job is to allow the child to play and try to identify what he or she is really good at, and then focusing on that and working on that. So my philosophies. The philosophies. There are 5 main education philosophies in the world today, 5 of them. And isms, often if you hear an ism at the end of a word, it signifies it's a philosophy, like communism or this or that. So a lot of isms are around. The first one is perennialism. The second one is essentialism. Third is progressivism. The fourth is existentialism. And the last one I'll talk about today is social reconstructionism. Now we'll talk a little bit about all of them. You will understand what their elements are, how they treat students, how they treat teachers, what the purpose of education should be. Let's start with perennialism. Now, the philosophy of perennialism comes from the word perennial, which means forever. Perennial means forever, going on and on and on and on. And the perennialists felt that education needs to be based on the ideas and thoughts of the ancients, of people like Plato and Aristotle, who lived a long time ago. That the ideas that they espoused, the ideas that they talked about were so important then, and they were equally important now. So basically we talk about the great thinkers of the past. And so this whole idea is that education needs to be based on the wisdom of the past, on the ideas that people in the past talked about and felt were valuable. And we had the individual kind of really espoused perennialism, at least in this last century, was Dr. Mortimer Adler. And he talked about classical learning, what was important to teach a kid. And so the basic element of perennialism is this. They felt that the truth is the same for all people, no matter where you are. If you are in Uganda, if you are in Tokyo, if you are in Australia, if you are in Peru, if you are in New York City, the truth is the same, and the curriculum that you are taught should be the same worldwide. No difference depending on your religion, no difference depending on where you're growing up. The truth is the same everywhere, and therefore the curriculum and what you are taught should be the same. Now the basics of this philosophy, perennialism, is that the purpose of the school is kind of a place where you as a student are passive. You receive knowledge from your teachers. You do not create new knowledge, you simply receive the knowledge of the past. That's the idea. It's a transference of knowledge from teacher to student. Lots of lectures. So the teacher's role is to impart knowledge, which means lecture, 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 and lecture. And the student has to be passive. You sit there, you take notes, you listen, and that's learning. Now, the next philosophy is essentialism, and pay attention to the word essential in there, which means basic or very important. The philosophy essentialism, it takes its name from the word essential, and they believe that there's a certain amount of basic knowledge and skills that you need as a student, that you need to be able to work in the future, get a good job, raise a family, etc. So reading, writing, math, job skills, that's what they focus on. They want to prepare you for a successful future and a successful career. We want you to be able to take care of yourself financially, emotionally, and career-wise in the future. And the guy who was kind of espoused this philosophy was named Hirsch, Dr. Hirsch. And so he felt that, we got to get you ready for life. And essentialism relied a lot on business and communication from business. So basically, businesses would tell a school what they thought students needed to know. And then the school would respond by adjusting the curriculum. So the business might say, okay, we need more engineers. So schools would say, okay, we will teach more math and engineering skills so that the students are ready for that career path. And the basics of essentialism, schools transmit knowledge and skills. They give you skills, they give you knowledge so that you will be ready for a job or a career in the future. And what does the teacher do? Well, the teacher uses lecture, recitation, discussion, drill, and practice to make sure you get those necessary skills. That's the key. And students Your job is to learn the content and to learn the skills and be able to apply them, hopefully, in your future career choice. Now, progressivism, the third philosophy, is interesting. It deals with this idea that the purpose of education is to prepare students to be lifelong learners in an ever-changing society. So they figure that we don't know what careers are going to be available in 30 years. So we have to teach you how to be a self-learner so that you can adjust to whatever life throws at you. You know, you might start off as an engineer, that career kind of it goes away, and then you have to pick up something else. Well, we have to teach you how to be a learner, how to teach yourself, how to be able to understand when you need to go back and study something new. And Dewey, John Dewey, was the guy who espoused this. He was the main philosopher of this in the last century. And the principles of progressivism. Student interest should guide the teaching. Whatever the students are interested in, that's what the teacher should teach. And the teacher should be a guide. We kind of call it a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage. So the teacher should be there to kind of help facilitate your learning as a student. We shouldn't tell you what to learn. We shouldn't direct how you're going to learn it, but we should help, assist. And student development should involve the whole student, not just the intellectual, but the physical too. You know, sport, recreation, even the spiritual side should be addressed. So the whole kid should be taught, not just the brain. There should be creativity, there should be music, there should be art, there should be PE, as well as math and science and everything else. And parents need to be involved. We haven't talked about parents yet, have we? It's the first time progressives are the first one who really talked about the issue of the parent. Bring the parent into the educational realm. And the basics of progressivism. The teacher's a facilitator, a resource, a co-explorer. I like that word. And the student needs to explore and make their own investigation. They have to go out and be willing to self-teach, to have a question and then desire to find the answer and go forth and find the answer through experimentation, through exploration. Existentialism, philosophy number 4, they believe that people are responsible for making themselves, that, you know, society can't dictate what you need to know. You have to dictate what you think you need to know. Puts a lot of responsibility on the individual to self-educate. And Sartre was the one who espoused existentialism. He was basically active in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s in France, but he was the one who basically brought forth this idea of existentialism. Even though he didn't apply it directly to education immediately, it was applied to education by his followers. So what are the basics of existentialism? The teacher is a resource, but only one. The kid can use books, other students, nowadays the internet, television, newspapers, magazines. You have a whole source of knowledge out there that you can access. Not just the teacher. And the student's job is to investigate whatever topic they've chosen until he or she understands the topic, him or herself. They basically decide as a student, okay, I've learned enough about this, it's time to move on. And now, social reconstructionism, the last philosophy that I will deal with, they believe that society needs to be made better and that education should be focused on making society better, giving students the information, knowledge, and basically desire to change society. And Paulo Freire was the one who basically came up with this in the last century. He was a South American philosopher and educator, and also very concerned about changing society. So social reconstructionism. Schools must improve society is the main idea. And what do teachers do? They help their students understand social problems, whether that be poverty or global warming. They basically help their students identify what are the social problems that we need to address as a society, and they work with them to help them figure out ways to address those problems and solve the issues. So students learn about the social and world problems, and they help to improve things. They want to make things better. Maybe that's where you look and you discover, okay, there's lots of litter out on the beach near Akita. So you organize a club to go out and clean the beaches every so often. That would be an idea of trying to make society better. And I think when you ask somebody, oh, what's your educational philosophy, it's very difficult often for people to articulate or to explain it. But if they are asked for metaphors about what is a teacher, what is a student, sometimes it's easier. So, how would you describe a teacher? Maybe you would describe the teacher as the captain of a ship, a bus driver, an explorer, a scout leader, or a parent. Any of these metaphors would kind of help you indicate what your philosophy of education is. Now, these are the philosophies, again, as I conclude. Perennialism, existentialism, progressivism, existentialism, social reconstructionism. These are the main ones that you will find active in the world today. Now, I talked to you at the beginning about my philosophy of education, saying it's pretty much stayed the same for 27 years. From when I started teaching high school in the United States in inner city schools, all the way to now when I'm director of the EAP at Akita International University. So, my philosophy, it's eclectic, which means I take a little bit from different sources. I don't have just one philosophy, which is actually very common. Most people take a little bit from here, a little bit from there. Mostly, I'm a progressivist. I believe in progressivism like John Dewey. Purpose of education is to prepare students to be lifelong learners in an ever-changing society. I don't know what job is going to be available to you in 30 years. So I can't exactly prepare you for that specific job. I have to prepare you with the skills to be ready to change with the society and with the job expectations, for example. Anyway, I want you to be ready to deal with whatever comes your way in 20, 30, 40 years. I'm also a little bit of a social reconstructivist, I think because I taught in the inner city and I've always been very concerned about social issues. I think education also needs to make society better. That's the key. So I'm eclectic, I'm mostly progressive, but I'm also a little bit of a social reconstructivist. But I do know one thing, I love teaching, have always loved it for 27 years, and I hope to be doing something with education for the rest of my life. So thank you very much for listening. Good luck, everyone.